So back when I was 18, 19, I thought that conditioning meant smashing myself with the hardest sessions I could find. Field length runs, pro style sprint intervals. I was working hard, but when it came to game time, even though I was loading up on carbs, caffeine, and whatever I could find, I'd still find myself gassed like 30 minutes in. And that's because I, like nearly all amateur players, tried to replicate the game directly, copied what the pros do, and I never really understood the energy systems that are at play. And when you train like this, you end up getting really good at being tired, not really performing as best as you can. So in this episode, I'm going to break down exactly why most rugby conditioning doesn't really carry over to match performance and what you should be doing instead. I'll also walk you through a real simple progressive plan that you can actually stick to and build upon week on week, year round. So what's up everyone? Welcome to another Rugby Muscle Podcast. I'm TJ. I'm a strength and conditioning coach for ambitious amateur rugby players. And for over 10 years, I've worked with athletes who are juggling training, work, and life. And I've seen the same conditioning mistakes kill on-field performance again and again. And I've also made most of these mistakes when I was younger. You see, most amateur players think that they're replicating the demands of the game, but they're actually replicating the feeling of training, high intensity, long duration efforts, never really recovering and just going again and again and again. In reality, 90+% of rugby is spent walking, standing still, or slowly jogging. You see, there's a massive disconnect between how the game actually plays and how each individual player within that game feels how they're playing it, and how you can actually build your conditioning to match the demands of each individual player. You're not trying to play all of rugby at once. So what I want you to do is the next time you watch a game of rugby, follow just one player and you'll see this for yourself. How long are they actually spent in the action? Yes, the game is sort of non-stop when the ball is in play. It's all action, high intensity, the whole way throughout. But each individual player, one of 30 on the field at a given time, is not continually performing high intensity action. We have to understand that that is the way that it is played. It is very short, high intensity bursts followed by walking, jogging, standing still, recovering for another high intensity burst. So when you're doing these long duration, high intensity, sub-maximal intervals, you're not preparing yourself for how the rugby game is actually played. Instead, what you're doing is probably sort of how training feels, where it's lots of like medium intensity efforts. And so what it plays out as is most of your conditioning sat between that 60 to 90% medium intensity range where there is no rugby being played. Rugby is either 90+%, really hard tackling, rucking, high intensity actions, or it's spent all the way down recovering. So that's what you need to prepare for when you're doing your conditioning. And then the other thing that people don't understand with their conditioning is this sort of tendency that it is just a pre-season thing. Most players just go hard on conditioning for like 2 to 3 months and then abandon it. Imagine if that's what you did with your strength work. Imagine if that's what you did with your lifting. You just lifted for 2 to 3 months every year. Sure, you'd make progress within those 2 to 3 months and you'd feel all right by the end, but then you'd have to start all over again every year. It's obviously not a good approach, but that's how most rugby players treat their fitness. They do it for a bit and then they abandon it and then they have to restart all over again. Instead, what I want you to do is treat strength and conditioning as that, strength and conditioning. Conditioning has to have the same weight as your strength work. It should be trained year round. And then the final mindset shift that I want you to make is that yes, you can train your ability to repeat high intensity efforts under fatigue. But what's better is to train your energy system so that you can repeat high intensity efforts over and over and over again on the pitch without fatiguing too much. And when that fatigue does creep in, you'll have a strong energy system that can flush that fatigue away and get you ready for the next effort. That way you're able to stay way more in control of games and push that high level and be able to continue to do that and have better outcomes. Like if I go back to 18, 19-year-old me, I distinctly remember people on the sideline saying, you look always like you're absolutely gassed. And I used to think, yeah, that's a good thing because I can really push the pace when I'm tired and I'm tired. Imagine how much better I'd be playing if I just wasn't tired, if I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and I looked fresh. That is what you want from your conditioning. That's what you want your conditioning work to do to you on game day. Okay, so let's get into the progressive conditioning plan that we actually use with Rugby Muscle and that actually gets our rugby athletes to perform better on the pitch than ever, whilst feeling fresh, feeling good, and able to get in all of their training around it, fits around their life, and it's a good system, all right? Trust me on this one. So stage one, we revisit here a lot. We spend a lot of our time here because it continues to give us massive return on investment at a low fatigue cost. If you have a resting heart rate of 60 to 70 or higher, you probably want to stay here until you get that below 60. It is a polarized approach, which means that we're working both ends of the conditioning spectrum, not getting stuck in that middle where most of the fatigue occurs. For the aerobic side, we're going to build aerobic capacity with lots of zone 2 work. And that is it. It's going to be low level, easy conditioning. I know a lot of you won't want to do that. If your resting heart rate is quite high, you'll feel like you need to work more intensity. But trust me on this one, the more that you do it, the more that you will see the benefit for you on the pitch. Build the volume here as you can tolerate it. Ideally, we want to get up to 2 to 3 weekly hours of zone 2 aerobic work. And if you're in season, the lower end is probably just going to be where you're going to stick to because of your ability to tolerate running volume. You're going to have a lot of rugby sessions in there that will then affect that. And you'll probably get some level of zone 2 work within that rugby stuff, but not as much. So we still want to make sure that we are getting zone 2 outside of rugby training. It might have to be off feet. Otherwise, I do really like running for the mental health benefits, the ease of use. You just head out of your door and go. And there is some level of specificity when it gets to getting some volume through the legs and your ability to just be okay with that during an 80-minute rugby match. On the explosive side of things, what we're looking at is a low volume of heavy weights, jumps, sprints, that high intensity stuff that you're just going to be doing in the gym to build out your strength and power and speed. Anyway, we might place some sort of emphasis on this to lower the rest intervals, but really what we want to do is put the real focus on putting as much intensity with those short bursts as we can. And what we want to improve is that intensity. So we want to get faster, we want to get stronger, we want to jump higher, jump further. We want to be more explosive. That's what we're working. We're not really working our ability to recover. We're working our ability to produce as much force, as much power, as successful an action as we can when it comes to doing those actions. And then our aerobic system is going to help us recover. Yes, we might reduce the rest over the blocks, but that more comes from the aerobic system allowing us to get to that repeatability. Now, we can utilize that repeatability by reducing that rest and continue to do that. That is definitely a good thing, but it's not the main outcome of what we're trying to look for here. Now, stage 2 is still going to be a polarized approach, but now we're going to add more volume to the high intensity stuff. So to balance the volume out, what we're going to do is probably replace 1 or 2 of those zone 2 sessions, or just some of that zone 2 time, with some tempo sprint intervals. Tempo sprint intervals are sub-maximal sprints that can be done on feet in a straight line or using changes of direction. Good to do on a field before or after training, or they can be done off feet before or after your gym sessions. You can do them on a bike, on a rower, lots of different ways that we can get this in. I'm not going to go into all the details on this episode. If you want to know more, drop a comment below and I will do a full video explaining how we utilize tempo within Rugby Muscle. Or of course, if you want to cut out all of the guesswork, links will be in the description to work with me directly. And then on the high intensity side of the spectrum, what we're looking at is we're going to develop your alactic power and your alactic capacity. This is your energy system that you utilize to produce high intensity efforts. Even when you're lifting weights, when you're sprinting, you still need to utilize energy to do that, and we're going to improve your ability to do so. This is done with intervals of like 6 to 8 seconds where you're working as hard as possible. Watt bikes, air bikes, those are my favorite options, but you can also do hill sprints, sled sprints, any modality where you can really put forth a massive effort for 6 to 8 seconds that you cannot sustain. You'll then go for like a 90% complete rest, usually around 60 to 90 seconds, or you'll go for a minimum recovery of like 10 to 20 seconds, rest, and then go again. It depends on how we're trying to improve our alactic ability. Usually you're going to repeat this from anywhere to 6 to 20 repetitions total, and you'll build that up over the weeks. This is all out work when you're working, but it shouldn't crush you. You should be able to maintain this quality throughout. And then one final session that we will utilize sometimes here within this stage 2 is a blend of both called high intensity continual training. For the scope of this video, I'm not going to go into too much detail again. I've put out information on this before. And again, if you'd like more information on this, you're welcome to let me know in the comments. What I like to utilize here is things like step ups or lunges, and we'll go for 10 to 20 minutes at a time for 1, 2, 3 sets. The key here is in an explosive action, an explosive stride or step up, and then a pause of like 2-ish seconds to let the blood flow come back in. You'll be surprised at how much of a sweat you'll get in and how you're able to sustain that power when you do so. This type of condition is not magic, and it's not something I do year round because it stops giving and yielding benefits after only a few weeks, but it is a great way of enhancing your conditioning nonetheless. And then finally, speaking of something that I don't do year round, this is stage 3. This is the final stage where things do get spicy. We'll only ever do this for 6 weeks-ish at a time, and we'll only do this 1 to 2 times a year, because the reality is that most won't need to do this stuff. Most of you will still continue to see improvements on the pitch without ever pushing this fatigue, pushing this hard, and you just won't need it. But if we do need to wring the sponge, this is what we'll do. We'll still keep ongoing sessions such as the tempo intervals, the sprint work, maybe even some of the zone 2 stuff, because the aerobic work and the top end speed and power is still just as important as it was before, and we need to maintain those qualities. But now we are looking to build some level of resistance to fatigue. We're going to do this with heavy lactate intervals. We're either going to be doing 4 times 30 seconds all out effort with 60 seconds rest, utilizing a bike or a rower, something where you can really push hard for 30 seconds before you see yourself start to slow down. That's why I like the bike or the rower. I don't really like running for this because, again, you're practicing running under fatigue. I don't want to do that. I want to push you as hard as you can, energy system wise, without that affecting your sprint performance. The other thing that we might do is 4 times 4 minutes of all out effort with 4 minutes between rounds. Again, you can utilize a bike or a rower here, but you could also use a circuit of different exercises to maintain that high intensity. What you could do here is 1 minute of burpees, followed by a minute of sled push, followed by a minute on the bike, going back to burpees for the final minute for your total of 4 minutes of real hard, high intensity output. Now, these sessions are absolutely brutal. They will produce a lot of fatigue that really affects the rest of our training. And this is one of the reasons that we only spend 6 weeks, once or twice a year here at most, is that fatigue that affects the rest of our training and limits the stuff that we can do with our other training. The other reason is that we simply hit a ceiling with this. It stops to provide benefits after around 6 weeks. And so why do we continue to train it? We don't. We go back to the other stuff that continues to allow us to improve in those areas. And if we want to push through fatigue, we'll do that via our rugby sessions. In the grand scheme of things, actually, most of our athletes don't ever get here. We stay within the first 2 stages and continue to see improvements and get tremendous returns on the pitch. Now, that is exactly how I structure all of the conditioning for the athletes within Rugby Muscle. If you want to stop guessing and actually apply this stuff properly, we have just released the Capacitor, which is a 12-week conditioning-focused training plan, and it is now live within Team Rugby Muscle. Or if you want it all done for you, and if you want all of your strength and conditioning, nutrition, everything taken care of by me personally, based on your schedule, your goals, your ability, I currently have availability to take on some athletes that are wanting to work with me one-on-one via coaching. Links are in the description for both of those, or just shoot me a message on Instagram if you are serious. The magic of this kind of conditioning protocol is that it supplements your rugby training rather than competing with it. You're already putting in a lot of tough work at training and in matches, and you want to be building yourself up to perform your best there. You want to be fresh, sharp, and dominant, not just constantly chasing fatigue. Now, if you're wondering how to fit this all into any given week with your rugby training, work, everything else that you've got going on, I have done a full episode breaking that down, when to do your conditioning, when to lift, and how to recover properly around it all. So make sure you check that one out. It is a game changer for making this stuff actually sustainable. If you're someone that just puts themselves into a hole after 2 or 3 weeks, definitely check that out. Or if you'd like to look into more details on how you can dominate collisions and contact situations, we'll be talking about that one in the next episode. If you found this episode useful, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and share it with a teammate who needs to up their fitness. If you have any comments or anything, you can now leave comments on Spotify and on YouTube. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.